with what you've been saying about Michigan and the the defensive ends and all of that stuff. I went back while you guys were talking and looked at the Penn State game. Michigan sacked Penn State 7 times, forced 2 fumbles. Penn State recovered both of those. Michigan needs to recover those on Saturday, and that will be a huge help for them.
Yep, agreed. You've got a question for you, Tony. So obviously watching Ohio State every week, I can say I do not, but I definitely watched them on Saturday. Do you think that game was more indicative of who Ohio State truly is, or do you think it was more so just Michigan State struggling, like that was a bit of a tough matchup for them? Like where do you feel like that performance, especially offensively, falls in regard to the scale of who they really are?
It's definitely a bad matchup for Michigan State with their secondary. And to hear Ryan Day tell it on Thursday, Michigan State secondary was just sitting on routes, not respecting the deep stuff. And the receivers went back to tell Ryan Day, like, hey, the deep stuff is open if we want it. And he's like, okay, let's go do it. And for Michigan State's secondary to be so disrespectful like that, I think they kind of got what was coming to them. But is that the real Ohio State offense? I think that is the full potential Ohio State offense. But is the real Ohio State offense what we saw against Penn State and Nebraska? Is like, or is it in the middle somewhere? Because we've seen C.J. Stroud and the offense relatively struggle against Penn State and Nebraska, where they don't look like we saw on Saturday. So I'm torn myself. I think they are more like this Michigan State game, but I'm not expecting that at all on Saturday. And I can see struggles like they did against Nebraska and Penn State on Saturday. But I think if there are matchup issues, Ryan Day can exploit them, and that's where people get into trouble. And I'm just interested to see if C.J. Stroud starts slowly, has some nerves, and then how long does it take for him to get out of that? Or does he start on fire? And then if he's on fire, I don't know that George is not going to do much. Like there's a lot of offense there, but I want to see it before I expect it to happen. I think Ohio State will eventually get going. I'm just wondering what those first 2 or 3 drives look like.
Yeah, it's funny because Mark and I talked about that before he got on too. Is just for Michigan, ideally you want to prolong the amount of time it takes Stroud to get rolling, and then also have a couple, long drives where you go up, 10 to 14 zip before he really gets rolling. Because, like I told Mark, and I'll say it again, as far as play calling, like Ryan Day is to me top 3 play caller in college football, and it's only a matter of time before he's gonna find, that matchup and exploit your defense. So it's I agree that it's just one of those things where you're either going to have to get to Stroud, or before he gets rolling, you kind of get to that point to where, Ohio State's offense is one dimensional, where, they're kind of trying to play catch up a little bit, which almost isn't a good thing either, because you probably don't want him throwing the ball that much, because of how explosive that offense is. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really good game. To kind of flip to the defense a little bit, if you had to, pick one level of the defense, whether it's kind of the D line, linebackers, or the secondary, which one, and especially in this matchup in the game Saturday, would you have the most concerns about when it comes to, playing Michigan and their offense, just how they operate?
Normally, the concerns about the Ohio State defense revolve around the safeties and against the pass. But with Michigan's offense, like there's not a lot of downfield stuff, and Ohio State has good corners, so that issue almost takes care of itself. But that is still like the main issue. Although I think maybe in this one it's the linebackers defending the pass against Eric All, Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, maybe Hassan Haskins, Luke Schoonmaker, like all of these different guys. So this is another one where it feels like Michigan State was a good matchup for Ohio State, what they do. I think Michigan is a good matchup for Ohio State's defense as well. And I said this on, I think, Mark's show and on my own show, where Ohio State is susceptible to the pass behind the linebackers. Most of Cade McNamara's throws are in front of the linebackers, and if the linebackers are dropping back a little bit, where just a lot of short stuff. If Ohio State can tackle, that's fine. But really where Ohio State's secondary has struggled has been a little bit more down the field behind the linebackers with a quarterback who can stretch it a little bit. Deep stuff against one of the two safeties that will be playing, or one of the three safeties. Ohio State will play three safeties a lot. I don't know how much three safeties they'll play against Michigan, because I don't know that nickel is really what they will need, especially when Michigan will trot out three tight ends, and who else knows, an extra lineman or whatever. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of the nickel look. But to answer your question, I think there are opportunities for Michigan to attack the safeties, but that's not really what they've done a lot of this year. So I think maybe for Michigan's purposes, the linebackers in coverage against the tight ends and the running backs might be something to watch.
Okay. Yeah. It's and like you said, I think what people kind of think about most recently is Ohio State in the national championship game. And, that I think that version of that Alabama team was really good. And I'm not sure there were many teams that would have matched up well against them, of just, where they were at as far as just development and players and, the NFL guys they had on that team. But, Ohio State has looked much different, obviously, from that. They've bounced back, and if I'm not mistaken, those the guys that they have are new to this year, correct? Or were some of those guys from last year as well?
Well, they've got a couple of new starters, and Steel Chambers, the linebacker, was a running back last year, and freshman corner and Denzel Burke. But they've got some guys who played a little bit last year, but they also have quite a few guys who are back from last year as well, and went through that entire mess when they had to play so many linebackers because they didn't have enough defensive backs through injuries and COVID and all of that stuff. And it was a very unfavorable matchup when you're putting somehow the middle linebacker gets stuck on Devontae Smith, and just that's just good scheming, good offense. And to go real quickly, you talking about Ryan Day, don't forget he's got Kevin Wilson in his ear as well. That's another one of the nation's best play callers in Kevin Wilson, and those two can be a two-headed monster at times. But the defense, the offense, I think they showed what they were capable of, both sides, last week. This is a different animal, though, with Michigan.